In this video, I want to remind you and maybe tell you some new information on shortcuts. I just want to go over some of the main shortcuts that you can use to navigate a little bit more quickly around Lightroom and introduce you to a couple of shortcuts that you may not be aware of. And then in the last part of the video, I also want to show you an organizational tool that you may not have used before called stacking. And stacking, by the way, is part of your first exercise. So be sure to go all the way through this video and get to the stacking part. To start with, though, I want to just walk you through some of these shortcuts. Hopefully you remember or you reviewed the recommended video from Intro to Photo about all of these organizational tools. And hopefully you've been using these for a while since you're in this next class. But I do want to actually just go over the shortcuts for them and remind you a little bit about navigating around Lightroom with those. So we're looking at a single image of a bird right now. I want to go down and start at the left of this panel with the grid view. Right now I'm in loop view, so I want to start with grid view. You can click on this icon to get into grid view, but it's nice to get used to just using the shortcut. And the shortcut for grid view is very intuitively G. This is so helpful. I can't tell you how helpful it is to know at least these basic shortcuts so that you're not constantly like moving around trying to get your mouse to the icon. You can just hit this on the keyboard. So that's the grid view. The grid view shows you all of the images. Remember that over here on the right we have the thumbnail view, so we can go in closer or pull back farther if we want a closer look or a further look. If we want to look at a single image, we can, in the library, we can go to loop view. That's the next one. We can click on the icon, or we can do E. I know E is not very intuitive, but that is what we use for the loop view. I've never come up with a good word to get to that, but E is what takes you to loop view. Now, while you're in loop view, and this is true in the single image in Develop too, but let's just go do it here. You can take advantage of the navigator, and you may or may not have used this a lot before. You do have to click it down. It might be like this when you first get into your library, and it's going to give you this little window. Right now we're on Fit. We could also Fill, which I don't usually find this useful, but that just fills the window, takes out the empty space. One-to-one actually shows you, depending on the size of your file, it shows you the 100% view of that. This is a fairly large file that I haven't cropped yet. But the one that I use mostly, and especially for my bird photos, is I use the zoom. And the zoom, you can go all the way from 1/16, which is going to pull it way back, all the way to 16:1, which is going to take you closer than you're probably comfortable with. For me, and this will vary, but for me, when I'm checking the focus of an image, I'm usually in 2:1. And on birds, I go right into the eyes. That's a really good place for me. So I leave it set there, and the only thing that I have to do to get to the zoom, the shortcut, is just clicking on that screen in and out. This takes it to Fill or Fit, and this takes it into the zoomed view. Now, the other thing that you may not have noticed is you also have, when you're in zoom, you have this little square on the navigation window that shows you where you are. So rather than having to like scroll around the window, you can simply place that square wherever you want to be. So very useful. E, and then no shortcut with the navigator and the zooming, but just ways to navigate into those quickly. The next view you may or may not have used. I'll show this to you briefly. It's not something I use a lot. This is the compare view. I usually don't introduce this in intro, so you may not have used it before. The shortcut here is C. And what it does, it can be handy. Oh, and I'm going to go back to G because I just realized I need to deselect everything. I had the wrong one selected. So you need to make sure that you only have one selected, or you have just the ones that you want to work on. So to be in compare view, ideally, let's say I need to compare all of these files. I can start with one and it'll move automatically to the next one, but if I have a specific group I want to compare, I can do that. Go to the shortcut, and you can see what it does is it's going to pull those up. I can actually zoom out if I want to, which might be easier here, although notice that I really have to be able to zoom in, and in this case I have to go here in order to see the details of what's going on there. So this is the select, this is the candidate, so we can make this little side-by-side comparison. If I decide the select is still my favorite, I can just go on and just bring up the others. If at any point I decide I like the candidate better, let's pretend I do here, I can just take the select out and make this one the choice, if that makes any sense. So this could be very handy for certain situations. Another view, I'm going to just click G and go back to grid. Another view which can be handy for slightly different reasons if you're trying to look at several photos at once is the survey mode, and this is N. Again, not intuitive, but N is for survey. And it pulls all the images that you have selected up at once. Now, this is not necessarily useful if you're trying to look at technical details, but might be good for composition. I often use this when I'm in collections if I'm trying to work on a final body of work and I just want to see how everything might look on a wall together, or just how it might sequence. That can be very handy. The next one I honestly do not use much. The shortcut is 0, but you're welcome to try it. I believe it does absolutely nothing in this calendar, this catalog, because there are no people photos in this catalog. But if there are, it will pull them up. Okay, let's go back to grid. That's a G. And let me show you a couple of other useful shortcuts here in the library mode. One of my favorites, we'll just go back to this image here. One of my favorites is actually if I go into the loop view, and this will work in either library or in develop. So in the library module, you can hit I, and that will bring up info. The first panel that comes up will be the name of the file and its designation. This is an NEF, the date that it was taken, the time that it was taken, and the total pixel dimensions of it. This is what my camera takes. It's a 6,000 by 4,000 image. If you hit it again, it's going to give you the camera information, the metadata. This can be super helpful, and those of you who've had classes with me know that I often use this in class when we're looking at images. Let's go back to the first one. If you click again, it goes off. And I want to point out something that's really handy about this. If I go to develop, and by the way, the shortcut for develop is D. If I go into D for develop, and I decide I'm going to crop this, which I probably will, and I'm just going to go ahead and make it a fairly tight square, and click done. Now you see that that pixel dimension has changed, and it is telling me, put it on fit, it's telling me the cropped dimensions of that image, the cropped pixel dimensions. Very, very useful if you're trying to make, doing cropping and trying to judge whether something is going to be still have enough detail or enough size to print or to do different things with. So that's a really great little shortcut. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take that off. Now we're in develop, and you notice that we are in this single view in develop, which you might notice we can have the single view and we can have some of these comparative views, but we don't have any of those other options there. See that with view modes is on, and this is all we can do. The other thing you notice is that if you go to a different module and you want to actually work with some of those other areas, you have to go back and pull them up. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. I just want to show you, not in this video, but I want to show you how to go back to library quickly. My favorite way to do it is just to go back to grid. Grid will always take you back to library. Now, if you want to use the shortcut L, it does not take you to library, but let me just show you what it will take you to. This is actually, there's a couple more that I want to show you, and then I'm going to move on to stacking. So another shortcut that I find incredibly useful is the L and F keys. So the F key will take you into full screen. I love this shortcut. I use it all the time because I just want to pull the image up, see it large, especially if I'm working on a bigger computer, so I can really see how it's going to look without all that stuff behind it. Just hit it once to go into full screen, hit F again, and it will take you out. But you can also, and again, this is handy in survey mode. Let's actually just look at these. Well, I'll do it single and then I'll do survey. Don't get carried away. I like the L key. So the L key is just, I think of it as L for lights out, and it just takes everything around the image down. Doesn't expand it, doesn't give you full screen, but it just sort of isolates it for a second. And the second time you hit it, it's going to take it completely out, and the third time it'll bring it back. If I pick 4 images, this is something I actually really do like to do. I do this sometimes in class demos, some of you might remember. I go to survey mode and then lights out, and I can look at those 4 without the distraction. So again, just a few of my favorite shortcuts. When we get back into the develop, I'm going to give you some shortcuts in the develop module that are very specific for that. Right now, I just want to give you some organizational ones. Okay, we're going to come out of this. So all I have to do is hit it twice more, and we are out of there. The last thing I want to do, let's go back to grid, is show you stacks. Okay. So stacks are a really wonderful way, and the reason I'm in this particular album, this is actually a group of photos that I haven't done a whole lot with yet, but I like to use this often for my bird photos, because what you can see, and I'll just make the thumbnails smaller and scroll down, you can see that my pattern with bird photos is that if I come across a bird that I really want to photograph, I tend to photograph them anywhere between 5, 6, 10 times, and sometimes as many as 50, depending on how long that bird stays still and how interesting they are. So I have a lot of these very, very repetitive photos that I have to scroll through. So one thing that I can do to make my my scrolling or my organization a little easier to manage is I can stack these. So I'm going to click on the first of this particular one. There's tons here. And I'll just do this visually because I can see that these are very similar. They don't have to be similar for you to stack them. There's other reasons to stack that we'll talk about in, I think, in one more unit. But this is what I find useful, is if I have a lot of images that are very similar, I want to stack them so that I can move on. I can look through them all together, or I can move on to the next one. So you can just come up here into photo and go to stacking. Group into stack is Command G, not G, but Command G. And you can auto stack by capture time. I'm not going to go there right now. Let's just go ahead and group this into the stack. And you can see that all of those images, where did those go? Oh, there they are. They're still selected. All of these images, you can see right here, there are 47 images. Let me make this thumbnail bigger so you can see that a little easier. So there are 47 images that I stacked up together. So it's just like putting a pile of papers together. They're stacked together. If I want to unstack them, I can simply click here. If I want to restack them, I simply click here. And you'll know that they're in a stack because of this number here and because of this little panel here. If you want to permanently take them out of the stack, you can unstack, and that is Shift Command G. So you can go that way, or you can simply come down here and find this, and it will unstack them if you decide you don't like that. By the way, as I mentioned, this is in your next assignment. Your exercise this week is to make some stacks. So now you have all the information you need.